hard to evaluate the studies and why people say, well, it's not the scientific method. Because it isn't, but what are we really doing? You know, what's our goal? And so to try and blend, you know, for me, I don't know that the animal studies are going to have that much relevance to people. I'd rather look at some basic cellular mechanisms and get some idea of what might be happening, and then maybe do a clinical trial, give Bacopa to people and start looking at some inflammatory factors in the blood, or see, you know, just to see what's happening.
So my question was, in Ayurveda is also more holistic than just herbal. And where they have the, you have not the dosas, but also you have the mind that has qualities of sattvic, rajas, and tamasic. And in the treatment, and then they have diet and lifestyle and everything. So that has huge complex structure for neuroscientists like yourself.
Absolutely. And what I'm doing here is very un-Ayurvedic.
Yeah.
I mean, an Ayurvedic physician would never treat somebody with just herbs. Whereas in the United States, that's all we want. We just want a pill to fix it. We don't want to worry about diet and lifestyle. But what the holistic approach I believe is doing in Ayurveda is really reducing inflammation in a number of different ways. Through herbs, through diet, through lifestyle. You know, there are some really interesting studies on yoga and meditation that show better outcomes from cancer therapies. I mean, so there are many ways to knock back inflammation. And because I'm a neuroscientist, I'm focusing on this, but I would never say that this would be, if you have Alzheimer's, just take Bacopa and you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the connection between this general area and issues of emotional issues like depression and anxiety that were sort of mentioned, and maybe the connection with the inflammation issue.
So I have some thoughts on it.
And I'm sorry, and just maybe as like a part of a whole.
Right.
Right. It definitely seems like part of a whole thing.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't really thought about inflammation in terms of things like anxiety. I don't think the field has thought much about inflammation. What we tend to focus on when we deal with diseases like depression and anxiety are the neurotransmitters and the chemicals that are used for the cells in the brain to communicate with each other. And we've spent a lot of time in Western medicine manipulating those neurotransmitter levels to achieve, some balance with those types of diseases.
Right.
And this is really outside of my area of expertise, and maybe there are some studies on inflammation and anxiety. I can't pull them off the top of my head. I'd have to do a search. But if there are, it's not a major thought in the field as to. But it would be very intriguing to see. Is this what is this doing, and how can it be disrupted? Because Bacopa is a very effective drug. We don't use it so much as an anti-anxiety in this country, but in India it is used very extensively.
Yeah, because it just seems like if you look at the other sort of, say, physical manifestations of an issue, there are some similarities. But also, as you said, we're focusing on the neurotransmitters so much in the West. You talked about the other issues of, the cell folding, the other things that are going on in the mechanism of action.
Absolutely.
And perhaps there's the same mechanism of action.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to know if there was more macrophage or microglial activation in people suffering from anxiety and depression. I don't know that those studies.
Is it just easier to work with neurotransmitters or something?
Well, no, it isn't necessarily, but it has to go with how the field evolves. So there are neurotransmitter imbalances in these diseases, and the drugs that work modulate those neurotransmitters. And so you go with what works. And in science, we have to get funding, and we have to get grants, and we're all reviewed by each other. And so things tend to go in trends, just like anything else. But I'm beginning to see a trend where we're beginning to look at inflammation in a number of different diseases. So it'd be interesting. I'll have to look up and see if I can find out anything on inflammation and more of what we call the psychological disorders.
Thank you.
Good question.
Swami, you've got one.
In this study, as you were telling that the particular medicine and its efficacy is decided by the actual chemical that is acting there. But I have read and heard from many Ayurvedic practitioners that in extracting the medicine, there is a prayer component to it.
Yeah.
So did you look at that possibility that it is when you extract medicine, you pray to the plant that please reveal your medicinal properties into
Yeah,
it?
and yes, that's a very good question, and that's one of the issues with natural products, because they have lots of active ingredients in them. They've got lots and lots of chemical components. You know, bacopa has the bacosides. There are lots, dozens of them. And so that's why we did a water extract, because that's like a tea. I mean, that's like making a tea. We didn't, and to do these studies, we have to have it in some kind of liquid. I mean, we have to have it somehow solubilized. So our water extracts, our teas and our infusions are probably the closest to how you would take it. So that's part of what my goal is to, we're doing the extraction because that's what we do in the West, and we try and see if we can find new compounds. But I'm also very interested in seeing what happens when you do a more traditional preparation. That's why we have the water infusions and the bacopa. And I personally believe that we're not going to find an individual component that's going to have these effects. I think it's a synergy of the multiple components, and that you have to have the multiple components. And we may never understand exactly how all of them interact. But again, that's where the East and the West kind of butt heads, because science likes to have an active ingredient and likes to identify one particular thing. But for natural products, I don't know that that's possible.
I think we're running out of time, so I want to thank you and present you with a very small token of our appreciation for